Just want to quickly welcome everyone to day 2 of the online version. I know a lot of you did end up writing to NPQ yesterday with registration questions or recording questions. Again, that email is webinar@npqmag.org if you have any questions. You will, of course, be getting the slides and a recording in a couple of days. Today is the day that we also have a closeout survey, and there's a specific question on that survey that we've added for you to sign up for Greg's Quick Tips newsletter. So please take that survey. It pops up on your screen. It only takes 30 seconds to complete. And if you want to opt in to getting his monthly newsletter of Quick Tips, that's where you'll put your email. So it's important that you do that as we close out the session today. And that's it for now, Greg. Turn it over to you and Bill and Paige and whoever all is here to answer all these questions.
Cool. All right. If there's anybody who has not, who wasn't here yesterday, please put something in the chat, because that's how you're going to talk to me and that's how I'm going to talk to you. And I want to know who was not here yesterday. Put it in the chat. I want to know. And while that's occurring, Rebecca wasn't here. Andrea wasn't here. Tanis wasn't here. Teal, Victoria. There's probably, looks like around 12 or 13 people weren't here, which out of 250 wasn't bad. So those of you that weren't here yesterday, you'll get the recording. Don't worry about it. But we're just going to headlong into the next topic. Now, just so that you know, I am a CPA that specializes in nonprofit organizations. We do audits. We do 990s. I also own a company called QuickBooks Made Easy. And in the land of QuickBooks Made Easy, it's just for nonprofit organizations. So if you are out there and you have any problems with accounting or doing QuickBooks or anything related to your accounting for your nonprofit, if you use QuickBooks, we're your guys. All right. So I can help you with anything. We can do all the way from you sign up for a tech support agreement and we answer questions for you. We have a training that's coming up. We'll talk about that later. I think what I want to do is launch this poll. So I'd like everybody to answer the poll. And once the poll is answered, then we're going to go over what we talked about yesterday and then get into what we're going to talk about today, which a chunk of it's going to be restricted grants. But anyway, what type of organization are you? All right. Most people are going to be traditional charities. That's 501c3 organizations. If you are a membership association, you're probably a 501c6. So we have a few of those, a few that are schools. There are houses of worship here. We have 9 of them. And I do want to speak to you guys for a second that are houses of worship. Performing arts organizations, we have 4. Social clubs. We have none of those. Quasi-governmental agency, private foundation, accounting firms. So Melody has 3 different entities. Yeah, I'm not surprised. She has a 501c3, a 501c4, and a PAC. I have some nonprofits like that as well. Amy put traditional charity in the chat. Don't necessarily need to do that. Just put it in the polls here, unless it's some other type of entity, in which case, let me know what it is. Canadian church, no school. All right. Yeah, it's a church. It's a church. If you're a performing arts organization, Sherry, put performing arts. All right, cool. And wow, we have 239 people in the room. And how many people have answered? We got 203. Not bad. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and end the poll so that you can see who it is that you're talking to. So 61% of you are traditional charities. We got 8 membership associations, 8 schools, 12 houses of worship, 6 performing arts organizations. We have 38 other types of nonprofits. We have 8 accountants in here. All right. So a Hispanic League Diag is a membership association. All right. So that's really cool. But anyway, and by the way, if you do not know this, your 990, if your year end is December 31, your 990 is due Monday. If you can't get it done, fill out an 8868. It's a form, very easy, very easily filled out online. No, quasi-governmental agency did show up on the form. Okay, Karen did her extension already. Okay, enough of that. So let's talk about what we're going to cover today. And just like yesterday, by the way, short questions, go in the chat. I'll be able to answer them immediately. Longer questions, put it in the Q&A, and Paige is on the back end, and she will answer questions for you. So this is how to make your screen bigger in Zoom. We covered this yesterday. And this is all the stuff we do. Here's our 3-day webinar series coming up. I'll mention that again at the end. All right. For those of you that weren't here yesterday, we talked about how to do in-kind contributions, how to do tracking volunteers, auto-allocating expenses we didn't necessarily get to, and board reporting we didn't get to. We're going to cover board reporting right now before we get into today's topics. Today's topics are restricted grants and more board reporting, okay? So that's what we covered yesterday, but we're covering day 2 today. So let me, you know what I need to do? I need to scroll to the specifics of what we're covering today. All right, this is where we need to be. All right. Sorry. And I'll get back over here. Probably making you sick to your stomach. We already did that. We already did that. All right, cool. So this is what we're covering today. But before we do that, I want to get to something that we missed. Yeah, the auto-allocating expenses is something that I'll teach at the end. It is something that you can only do in QuickBooks Online if you're downloading transactions from the bank feeds. And I'll point it out at the very end. Okay. Here's somebody saying, there's 3 or 4 of you wondering about the auto allocation. So we're going to do that at the very end. So right now, I'm going to do the board reporting. Then we'll head into restricted grants. And then at the end, I'll do auto allocating expenses. All right. So the board reporting. Now, I'm going to go into a QuickBooks data file. And I'm going to go over here to QuickBooks. And for those of you that weren't here yesterday, just like yesterday, we took a break about halfway through. We're going to take a break about halfway through today. So in about 50 minutes, you're going to get a break. Okay. All right. So there are a lot of reports that board members want. All right. But really what my goal with this topic is to give you basically what I think you should be giving your board on a monthly basis. And I'm not talking about the executive committee. I'm talking about the overall board. All right. And you should give these reports to them once a month. Now, I will ask you, what are the 2 main financial statements that really accounting is all about? Put it in the chat. Who knows what the 2 main financial statements are? Laura says the balance sheet and the P&L. She's exactly right. So what you should be giving to the board at a minimum is a balance sheet and a P&L compared to the budget. The balance sheet you don't need to compare to a budget, but the P&L you do. The P&L is going to tell you the activity of the organization in and out over a period of time compared to a budget. And the balance sheet is going to give you how much money you have in the bank and what your other assets are and your liabilities. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build these reports for you, and then I'm going to show you where you can memorize them. We talked about memorizing yesterday, but I know there's a lot of newbies in here, so we'll do this again. So I'm going to go to reports right here. And just like yesterday, I told you there's standard reports. There's your memorized reports, which QuickBooks calls custom. There's management reports, which are something you should ignore. And then multi-company reporting is something that's only in the advanced version, and it's not something that we really teach here. All right, so I'm going to go to standard. And one report that you definitely need to give them is a budget to actual report, okay? Now, in our 3-day webinar training, we teach how to create the budgets. So I don't have time to do that. But if you go to the gear and you click budgeting, this is where you go to enter a budget. And this is also where you go to get a P&L compared to budget. So I'm going to click on budgeting. And I'm doing a budget to actual for July of 24 to July of 25. So I'm going to click here. By the way, I should tell you, usually you would think if you go to create reports, you go to reports. But when it comes to budget to actual reports, the first time you try and do a budget to actual report, it's best to go to the gear and go to budgeting. That's where you're going to originally pull down your budget to actual report. Then I'm going to show you where and how to memorize it. And then from there on, after it's memorized, you'll be able to get to it from the report section. Okay. So first time you get the budget to actual, pull it from here and click on budgeting. And then after you've memorized it, then you'll be able to access it from the little reports button over here. Okay. So here we go. So I'm going to click on this one here. I'm going to do a run budget to actual report. Now, when you do this, it's automatically going to give you, for each month, it's going to give you an actual, a budget, and a variance in dollar amount and a variance in percent. And it's going to, so that's 4 columns for the month of July, then 4 columns for the month of August. By the way, we start here in July because for this data file, our year begins July 1. But it's 4 columns a month. So there's a lot of columns here. And while somebody on a finance committee might be interested in seeing budget to actual on a by-month basis, if you don't budget by a month basis, you don't care about this at all. And even if you do budget by month, you still don't need the board to see all these columns. So you want to basically customize this report and then memorize it so you don't have to keep fixing it every time. So I'm going to click on customize. And I'm going to click on, you see where it has rows and columns right here? Now, when you first see it, yours might be closed like this, but you click the little triangle and it opens it up. It says account versus month. I'm going to make it account versus total. I'm going to click run. All right. So here we have the actual and here we have the budget. And then we have the difference in dollar amount and the difference in percent. Now, I don't know about you, but I like the percent. Some of you might just like the dollar amount. I don't think we need both of these things. Again, you can customize and you can get rid of one or the other. And I am going to get rid of, here's over the dollar amount, here's the percent. I'm going to unclick the dollar amount because I like percent. I click run, and now I've got a budget to actual. All right. So I'm going to memorize this report. Yes, Marcy, the nonprofits, the P&L might be called a statement of activity in your data file. It's the same thing. Can you enter a budget for a balance sheet? No, you can't, Christine, only a P&L. All right. What about forecast versus actual? So I think I need to know more about what you mean, but forecasting reports are not in QBO. How did you reduce the columns? Can you redo it? So Dominica, I need everybody to pay real close attention because I don't want to have to redo everything every time. I'm going to do it one more time. All right. So what you do is you go to the customize button and you see where it says show grid right here. It did have account versus month. I'm making it account versus total. So that's where you do it. All right. All right. So once you have this like you like it, you click save customization. I'm going to click it. I'm going to name it. Okay. I'm going to say my year to date budget versus actual. Okay. Of course, all of that looks awful because I have the caps lock on. My year to date budget versus actual. All right. Now, you can have a group if you want to. I created a group. To create a group, you just click add new group and title it. I created a group called board reports. So then all of my board reports are in the same group. I'm going to click save. So now this report is always available. So say I'm up here and I want to look at my budget versus actual. I click on reports. I don't go to the standard. I go to where my memorized reports are, which is right over here where it says custom, right over here. I go ahead and click it. And then you'll see here's my year to date budget versus actual. I'm going to click on it and it opens up, and notice how it's only 2 columns already. It's got all of the changes in it I want made. If you did not do that, if instead you went to your gear and you went to budgeting, when you went to pull this report up the next month, if you didn't do it from a memorized, once again, you'd have a column for each month, which is a pain in the butt. So that's why I like memorizing it, okay? Now, the second report, let's see, mine says P&L classes at the top, even though the classes aren't in my report. So I need to see your report, Jessica, so I can understand it before I'm able to give you an answer. Janice, I run these reports by class. Does that mean you budget by class, Janet? Is there a way to remove the total columns and have only the class columns? They are redundant when running by class. I need to see the report to see, or you must have subclasses is I think what you're probably looking at. But anyway, that's something we need to take on with tech support. All right, the next report is a balance sheet, which might be called a statement of financial position. I'm going to go over here to standard, and I'm just going to click balance sheet. It's pretty basic right there. Now, of course, I need to get some date ranges in here. 24 and 06/30/25. There we go. And you probably want to memorize this. So this says this year to date. This fiscal year to date is probably what you actually this fiscal year to last month. That's what you should memorize it like. Because usually here we are on May 12th. So when we report to the board, we want it through April 30. So if you memorize the report with this fiscal year to last month, the report, whenever you pull it up from your memorized reports, will always be what you want, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and save this balance sheet. I'm gonna add it to board reports, and then you click save. So now, whenever you wanna see these reports and give them to the board, custom reports, here they are right here. Now, there is a feature where you can have them automatically emailed to your board members. I don't want them automatically emailed myself because I would prefer to wait until I know that what I'm about to send them looks good. So, but anyway, so when you're ready to send them manually, here's my year-to-date budget to actual. There it is. And there's a little envelope right here. Right there, a little envelope. I'm going to click it and email right there. And then you can email who you need to. And you can email to more than one person. You can cut and paste a bunch of emails right in here and it gets sent as a PDF. All right. So that's how that works. All right. The next thing that I think you may not show the board, but it's a very important report that you want to capture, and it has to do with what we talked about yesterday. Remember how I told you that whenever you do an audit or a 990, we'll pull up a 990 PDF, it's very important that nonprofits, unless you're a house of worship, it's very important that nonprofits are able, let me get the 990 PDF here. Here we go. Are able to report their expenses by function. And when I say by function, what I mean is that your expenses you should be able to report with a column for program, a column for admin, they call it management in general on the 990 tax return, and a column for fundraising. And then the rows would be your natural categories of expenses like travel, occupancy, which is rent, office supplies, what have you. All right. So you use the class feature to track that. So I do think that you should generate a P&L by class. To do that, if you go into your standard reports, you're going to see one that says P&L right class right there. I've already memorized one. Here it is. And look how beautiful this is. This gives you your expenses are broken out, one for each one of the programs. Now I have my program subbed under a parent class called program. And then I've got admin, and then I've got fundraising. So what's really beautiful about this report is, first of all, you can see how much of your money is spent on your programs versus admin versus fundraising. Now, as a matter of fact, funders want to know that you are spending at least 75% of your expenses on programmatic activities. So there's actually a way to get the percentage on here. Let me show you that. If you click customize and you click it's under I was thinking about what one of the questions was. I forgot. Oh, okay. Let's see. Header, footer, rows and columns. Oh, I don't think it's here. Here we are. It might be here. Here we are. Under compare another period, if you click percentage of row, whoops, if you pick percentage of row, I want you to see what happens. I'm going to run the report. And now we can see, let me see if I can, Go Green Guidance Center, 46% of our expenditures are for the Guidance Center, 18% is for the Synergy Conference, 4% is for the Aware campaign. And if you go all the way over here, total programs is basically 70%. I wonder if I can get this a little bit bigger for you. Okay, so total programs is 69.99%. 21% of your expenses are for admin, and 8% is for fundraising. All right. Now, I will tell you, somebody wanted to know what this OO is. Somebody tell them what the OO is. Anybody know? These are your classes, and somebody wanted to know what the subclasses are. I'm going to go to the class list. I'm going to go to classes. And what I've done is I've created a class called programs. And then underneath it, I have subclasses for each one of my programs. And the way to create a subclass is you just click new, you name it. I'll call this new program. I'll click subclass, and I'll make it a subclass of the parent class programs. That's what that is. All right. So the reason why I'm putting numbers is because if I don't, it's going to put the columns in alphabetical order, with an admin being the first column on reports. I want program to be the first column on the report because that's how it is on your tax return and also on your audit. So if I put OO as a program, then that'll go first, 9-8 admin, 9-9 fundraising. So then it'll be in numerical order. Does that make sense? Now, somebody wanted to know why it is that there was a column on this report that said OO. And the reason why is because when you enter transactions, let me duplicate this. When you enter a transaction plus new, either manually or through the download, which we'll get to downloads at the end, you can put something to the parent class. I don't want you to. I really don't want you to. I wish there was something called non-postable classes, just like I wish there was something called non-postable accounts, but it doesn't exist in QuickBooks. So somebody, some idiot, not you, of course, because you're smart, but somebody else might accidentally put something to the generic program. Some people, they'll have expenses that they don't really know which program it goes to, but they know it's not admin, so they'll put it to the generic program. You can do that too. That's another reason why I see things in here. But anyway, because you could conceivably put something there, that's why this column appears. Now, if you don't like this column, you're kind of out of luck, You either are going to not have subclasses or send this over to Excel and remove the column. Okay. Let me see. How do you spread salaries and payroll to programs? You do it based on the time spent, and you do it via either a journal entry or a write check window. I'll give you, when I do it for grants, you'll see it's going to work the same for classes. All right. For a school, corrected, there would only be one program called education, and perhaps fundraising would have subclasses. The only reason why fundraising would have subclasses is if you have different fundraising events, but there's also you need to use accounts to track special fundraising events. It's in the training, the 3-day webinar series that I go through. Okay. Let's see. What else? If you remove $0 amounts, does the program go away? I don't believe it does, but I'm going to click this and click just all non-zero and click run report, and it still doesn't go away, but that's a good idea. All right. So those are the 3 reports that I like. I'm going to stop for a second, and then I want to start getting into grants. But before I do that, anybody who is a house of worship, put it in the chat. Absolutely not, Kelly. Absolutely not. All right. So Jessica, Karen, the other Jessica, Patricia, Kathy. Okay. So if you are a house of worship, I highly recommend that you go to my website, because we have the only training in the planet for houses of worship. If you go to on demand right here, you will see a training product just for houses of worship. I'm going to click on this. It's $2.99. It's about 8 hours of learning. You'll click online, and then you add to cart. You have it for a month. It goes through tracking vendors, donors, charts of account, your funds. That's the big thing people want to track. They want to know the balances in each of their designated funds. We talk about that. There's all kinds of stuff that we do there. Okay, or houses of worship. You can also go to a live training. We have 2 live trainings coming up for houses of worship. Hold on, the rest of you. I just don't want to make these people feel left out. One of the trainings, let me go into the webinars. There we go. We have a training next month. It's a 2-day training. It's only for Catholic-based organizations that have to report to a diocese. So if that's you, sign up for that. That's not you, sign up for either September 14th or September 21. We have 2-day webinar series. This one's for the desktop. Yours would be for online. Okay. All right. Adishwa wants to know where they'll get the link for the recording. So Jean, when will they get the link for the recording?
I just put it in the chat, but it takes about 3 days to edit the recording. So you can expect the recordings of both days early next week.
Okay. All right.
Those will come from NPQ, Nonprofit Quarterly, npqmag.org.
All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to spend some time on tracking restricted grants. All right. So that is the main thrust of day 2. We're going to do more board reporting at the end. We're also going to look at the downloads from bank feeds and how to use that to auto allocate expenses. Okay. Probably twice a year, Jessica, but that's the first one that's happening. So you should definitely, I would get the on demand because it's more thorough because it's longer. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to, and it's still us teaching. So Barb would be teaching it. She's the church lady. But anyway, so I want to talk about grants. So let me go back to my little deck, and here we go. For restricted grants, how many of you have grants? Go ahead and put it in the chat. You have grants that are restricted in some way. Put it in the chat. Hey, Chip, how's it going? All right. Awesome. All right. So restricted grants. We're going to spend a minute. So some of this is going to be like accounting understanding, and then we're going to get into the QuickBooksy stuff. Okay. First, we're going to define what I mean by a restricted grant. Then we're going to show you how to enter a grant. Then we're going to show you how to point non-payroll expenses to a grant. Then we're going to show you how to point payroll expenses to a grant. Then we're going to enter a budget for a grant. Then we're going to look at a lot of reports for grants. And then we're going to look at projects. That's something that some of you may have heard of. We'll talk about it later. And then at the very end, I've got a little thing that I feel like is really important that I need to explain to you about restricted grants. I'm going to explain the problem. You tell me if this resonates with you as a problem that you have, and then we're going to show you how to fix it when we're done with restricted grants. Here's the problem. Say your year end is June 30, and say you get a grant on June the 29th for $100,000, but it's not to be used until next year. It's restricted for next year for particular things. It looks like you've made a lot of money this year, but in reality, that money's for next year, and it kind of throws off your budget to actual, and it makes your P&Ls look weird. Who has that problem? Put it in the chat. All right. Okay. Yes. Okay. So I know that that's a big deal. So once we show you how to track the expenses that are paid out of a grant, we'll talk about what it does on the P&L and how to fix that problem. All right? Okay. So let's move. So there are two reasons why a grant may be restricted. One is called a use restriction, which means the grant is restricted in terms of how you can use it, okay? Now, the grant is restricted to more than just use it for your organization. Like if you get a grant from somebody and it says, oh, you know, use it for use it to help feed the children, and that happens to be the mission of your organization, well, that's not a restricted grant. It has to be more restricted than that. Use it for this particular program. That means it's restricted for use. Or it could be real anal, like these government grants. Use it, just pay salaries for this person for this time period and this rent, stuff like that, okay? Reimbursement grants are always restricted, okay? So that's one way of it being restricted. Another way a grant can be restricted is if it's time restricted. That means I've got the money, I can spend it however I want to, but I can't spend it until next year or the year after that or the year after that. That means it's time restricted. Many grants are both use and time restricted, okay? If it's one or the other or both, you got a restricted grant. One more thing, the restricted grant could come from a foundation. The restricted grant could come from a corporation. The restricted grant could come from a government. A lot of times, who gets money from the government? You have these government contracts. Put it in the chat. Who gets these government contracts from the federal government or from the state government? Yeah. So those, even though the word says contract, it's a grant, okay? It's a grant. They're not contracts usually, they're grants, okay? No, it does not have to just be both in order for it to be restricted, Michael. It's one or the other, okay? All right, so, but the other thing is it could be from an individual. If a person gives you money and say, use it for this particular purpose, it's a restricted grant, okay? It's just from an individual. Now, restricted grants are very different than restricted funds, okay? Restricted funds are different. I don't know if I have that in here. Let me see if I do. Hold on. I may have not put that in here. No, I didn't. All right. Restricted funds, that's what houses of worship usually have, designated funds. And for those, you want to track them. There's a couple of ways of tracking them. Regular for-profit charities, you guys also have restricted funds. A restricted fund means, I don't know, you have a project that's occurring and you're gathering money from umpteen million people to cover the project. That's a restricted fund. It's not a restricted grant, and it's not to be tracked the way that I'm going to teach you to track restricted grants. Restricted funds, if you are a regular charity and you have a restricted fund, a capital campaign is a restricted fund, Stacy. Capital campaign is a restricted fund. All right. So those you want to, if you're a regular charity, you're going to use the class feature to track that, because it's like a mini program of your organization. It's just a program that ends in a particular period, but that's not what we're covering today. If you're a house of worship, we have a very unique way of tracking your designated funds using liability accounts on the balance sheet. And that's one of the main thrusts of that webinar that we have coming up, and what's in the training. An endowment, there is a very distracting sound that sounds like you're typing. If you're not the speaker, please mute your microphone. Ooh, wow. Somebody is very upset. How do you track a capital campaign? Well, it's going to take about an hour for me to teach you. There's a whole topic in my on-demand training on tracking a capital campaign. Okay. Bill says it's Greg's headset. All right. Let me do this. Does this sound better to y'all? Does this sound better to y'all? Okay, so I'll hold my headset like this. It does mean that I can only type with one hand though. All right. Okay, so let's move on. All right, so I'm going to skip to the end of what this topic is. And by the way, we're going to break in 20 minutes. So we got 20 more minutes and then we're going to break. And if you're a house of worship, just hang with me, okay? You're going to learn through this anyway. Plus, I'm very interesting. All right. The ultimate goal of the topic is to teach you how to get a report that will tell you how dollars were spent from each and every one of your grants, okay? So that report is basically a grant profit and loss compared to a budget. Now, you may not have budgets for your grants. If you don't, you can still get a grant P&L. I'm going to show you how to do that too. So what this is going to do is it's going to show you how the dollars have been spent on a grant. It's going to, if it's a reimbursement grant, it's going to help you determine how much to request for reimbursement. If you have a budget for a grant, it'll tell you how much is left to spend by line item. It will also ensure that you're not counting a single expense on two different grant reports, okay? And then finally, it'll help you determine if there are any restricted grants that you've spent money for inappropriately. So it's going to give you everything you need to track your grants and to ensure that that you're giving appropriate reports to the funder to show how the dollars were spent. And the most importantly, when I come out to do your audit, I do audits, I can check to make sure that you're in compliance with your grants. All right. So that's what we're going to do. This is the in-depth training, Stacy. That's what this is. I'm confused. No, I can do audits if you don't use QuickBooks as well, but I prefer to do QuickBooks audits. All right, so I'm going to ask you a question because I assume most of you have restricted grants. I assume you have to report at the end of the reporting period how you spent the dollars, at least on some of them. I want to know how you presently track restricted grants. Now, some of you don't track them at all. You just wait until it's time to do a final grant report and you figure it out then. Others of you are not doing it in QuickBooks, but you are doing it in Excel. And then the rest of you are doing it in QuickBooks. Either you're using the customer or donor list in QuickBooks, you're using the class list in QuickBooks, you're using special expense accounts in QuickBooks, or you're using projects in QuickBooks. And that covers just about everybody. Now, we have a total of 267 people on this phone call, and I want to know what every single one of you is doing to track your grants, except for the 10 or 11 of you that don't have them because you're houses of worship. So we've got 100 people that still have not answered this poll. It's always upsetting to me. I don't know why you don't answer polls. It drives me crazy. Anyway, and this is a really big deal, all right? So because I know that there's more than one way to track grants, I'm going to teach you the best way, and I'm going to show you why it's the best way. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll so that we can see what people are using. So let's see. That's fine, Brittany. That makes sense. Michael is not answering because he does it more than one way. All right. So I'm going to click to end the poll, and I'm going to share the results. So what we have here is there are a third of you, 16% of you, 33 of you that are not doing it at all. You just wait. Obviously, that's a huge problem, all right? Because if I come to do an audit, I can't see whether or not your grants are really, your reporting is really appropriate. It really needs to be done within QuickBooks. Same thing with the Excel people. If you're doing it in Excel, I'm sorry, I can't rely on an Excel document if I'm your auditor without tying it to your grants. And if you get a site visit from a funder, you're going to be in trouble, okay? 25 of you are using customers and donors. That's the right way to do it. You're correct. That's what I'm going to show you. 64 of you are using classes. I understand that classes can be used to track grants, but I want you to use classes to track program, admin, and fundraising. And if you're using it to track grants, then I can't get a P&L by class from you, which we just showed you earlier is vital to see how much you're spending on each program. There are 17 of you using special expense accounts. That is the scariest answer of all, okay? Because now you have to have a special supplies account for each grant. I cannot stand that, all right? That's a really bad idea, okay? Your P&L ends up being really long. Now, there are 14 of you that are using projects. Projects are a subset of customer jobs. So the 14 of you that are using projects, you actually are using the customer job field. You've just added the tag of projects. So as I teach using customer jobs, do not freak out. At the end, I'll show you how you can turn them into projects and why you would prefer to do that if you'd like, okay? So I'm okay with customer jobs. I'm okay with projects. I am not okay with anything else, okay? I understand that you might be using classes. I know that's really the biggest group. What I want you to do is for the next grant, start using customer jobs, all right? So I'm gonna go into Quickity Books and let's see. Now, I've talked about this, I think, 2 times now. We did it at the end of yesterday. When you enter an expense, there are 3, count them 3, one more time, 3 things that you need to track. And what I mean by that is there are 3 things you need to tell QuickBooks about an expense when you enter the expense. All right, let me stop the sharing here. Yes, Stephanie, it does. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the plus new button and I'm going to click check. And Carolyn, I still want you to look at this. Okay. All right. So I'm going to click on check. Now you're going to see that there is a place to put a category, a place to put a donor, yours might say customer, and a place to put a class. There are 3 things you need to track about in an expense, and these are the 3 fields that I want you to use to track those things, okay? What do we put in the category field? We covered this yesterday. Put it in the chat. What are you supposed to put in category? What do we use that for? Put it in the chat. What the account is.
And so I don't want to have 5 supplies accounts, one for each program, or 5 supplies accounts, one for each grant. I just want one account for supplies. So my P&L is short. So that's what you put for the category. You just put the one account called supplies. Okay. I'll just do one for equipment rental. We'll say equipment rental. Okay. Over here on the right-hand side, what do I want you to use classes for? Put it in the chat. What do I want you to use classes for? Whether it's a program, admin, or fundraising, and if it's a program, which program it is, okay? Notice how I didn't use sub-accounts here, and notice how I didn't use numbers, and so now admin goes first. I probably want to change that. But anyway, so I want to put program admin or fundraising here. So the only logical place to put the name of the grant is where the customer name would normally go. Yours might say donors, yours might say donor project. If you have that feature turned on, yours might just say customer, might say member, might say client. You can change the name here. But anyway, this is where I want you to point it to a grant, okay? So what that means is that you need to put the grants in the customer or donor list, okay? Once you do that, then you can either keep them there or also make them a project. We'll talk about that later, okay? All right. Okay, Sherry, I have a better way. But anyway, let's see. So Candy, it's a little long. Probably want to put that in the Q&A if you wanted to talk to Paige about it. All right. So because of this, I'm going to show you putting your grant into the customer list. Now, notice how we have Help for You Grant Foundations. That's the funder. But do you see how we have a separate name in the customer list? They're called sub-customers for each one of our grants, because Help for You gives us a grant every year. I need each and every grant as its own name in the customer list, because you need to get a report for each and every grant. Okay, so don't worry, Deborah, we have that service. All right. So anyway, no, I'm not suggesting you put the donors in as customers. I'm just saying you put the grantors in as customers. Does QBO allow a class listed in programs? You know what? I'm going to teach for a minute. I'll come back to the questions. What I'm about to teach you is pretty intense. Don't ask any more questions for at least 10 minutes. Don't ask any questions for 10 minutes. All right. And just pay very close attention here. All right. So think about it though. If you get a grant and you spend the money, sometimes the very last expense for the 2020 year was actually paid in 2021. Okay. So this way we can figure out which grant we're going to point the expense to. All right. So I'm going to go to the customer list. To get to your customer list, now this is interesting for the newbies. You would think most of your lists are over here under gear. As a matter of fact, if you click gear, you'll see something called all lists. But the vendor list, the customer list, which might be donor list for you, and the employee list, they aren't here. They're in this weird bar along the left-hand side that always has different names on it. So does anybody know where the customer or donors list are? Put it in the chat. Does anybody know? Yep, it's under sales and it's the fourth one down. Yours might say customers. I've changed mine so it says donors. I'm going to go ahead and click it. And here's the list. To add your grantor, you go up to new donor. Now, this is what I want you to do. As soon as you find out that you've been awarded a grant, maybe you got an email after you filed an application, maybe you just got a check with a letter. As soon as you find out about it, as soon as you signed a contract with the government, you are going to click New Donor. Now, if it's a new a new grant that you got from an existing funder, you see the thing that says Sub Donor. You're going to click this box down here. First, we got to name it. What I want to put in this name field right here is the name of the grant. I'm going to call it Help for you grant, and this is for the 2021 year. All right. And actually, you know what? I'm going to put that. Yeah, I'm going to put that in the name field. The company field, I'm going to put, if there is a grant number, a lot of times there is for government grants, I'm going to put that here. All right. Well, actually, it's probably numbers here. All right. Okay. And I'm going to click subdonor, and I'm going to find the funder. There it is right there. And now I click save, and that's how I would add it. All right. So I'm going to go back to my donors list, and let's go back to where help for you is. And you can see here it is. And see, now I can start pointing transactions to it. I can either point the transactions manually by picking it right here. I'll just start typing help. They'll all pop up. There's the one. I can also add it from the downloads, okay? Those of you that are used to using the downloads in QuickBooks, you will see that as you enter expenses, you can also point them right here, okay? Help for you 2021. Sometimes your expense needs to be split between different grants. I'm going to click the split button, and I can point it between different grants here. Put part of it on the one line, and then part of it we'll put to a different grant. Okay, so that's how that works. All right, so you can split individual on manual transactions as well as you can from the bank feeds. Now, if, however, I'm going to go back over to my donors. If, however, when I click new donor, it's like, you know what? The funder doesn't even exist. I've got to create the new funder. So then you're going to go RAC Foundation. You'll put the name of the funder here. And again, we're doing this as soon as we find out about the grant. There's a reason. I'll cover it in a second. I'm going to click save. Now, I'm never going to point any transactions to that. I'm simply putting it up here. So then now when I go back to my donor list, and I click new donor. Now I can put the actual grant, RAC. I like to put the dollar amount, 50K, in the name. And then I like to put the year it applies for, 2024-25. And then over here, I'm going to put the grant number, 2024. They usually put the year and the grant number. I know those government grants do. And then there we go. And then I click sub donor, and I click RAC right there. And then I'm going to click save. So when I go back to my donors list, you'll see here is RAC right there. Okay. Yes. Only tie things to the sub clients, not to the top level. I didn't really fill out a check yet. I'm going to get to doing that in a few minutes. I just wanted to show you how to enter the name. The other thing I wanted to tell you, and this is an advantage of not using accounts and not using classes, but using customer job, you can attach documents. So what I'm going to suggest you do is that email that you got letting you know that you won the grant, that grant agreement or contract that you signed, that letter from the donor, if it was from an individual but it was restricted, attach it to the name. To do that, you click on the grant and you click this edit button. When you click the edit button, it'll take you to basically the window where you added the grant. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you're going to see something that says add attachment right there. I'm going to click it, add attachment, and then I'm going to go to where my grants are. Let's see. And I have all of my grants in a folder called Scanned Grants. Here it is. I click open, And you can attach more than one thing. Don't worry about the space. Intuit has enough space. Don't worry about it slowing up your data file. It's not going to. I can add more attachments if I want. I'm going to click save. Now, what is so beautiful about this is if I'm your auditor and I need a copy of the grants, anybody that gets audited, you know I need copies of the grants. Now you no longer have to provide them to me because they're already here. I simply click on this. I click on edit. I scroll down to where the name is. I click it and it pops it up on the screen and there's my grant. Isn't that kind of cool? Put in the chat if you think that's neat. I think that's really very, very helpful. All right. So yeah, it's dope. I agree. We got about 5 more minutes, then we're going to take a break. Once you've entered the name in the list, then you can start pointing transactions to it. Okay. Now, if you know what, before I even do that, I'm going to stop. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and create the P&L for the grant and memorize it so that you'll know how to do that. Then I'll start adding transactions and pointing them to the grant, and you'll see how it populates the report that you're going to memorize. So first thing let's do is let me go ahead and duplicate this screen. And by the way, for the newbies, if you need to have a duplicate screen, if you want to add another window for your QuickBooks so you can not just looking at one thing at a time, if you put your mouse up here at this little file folder tab, okay, it looks like a file folder tab, and you right click. By the way, that's if you use Chrome, which is what Intuit wants you to use QuickBooks. They want you to use Chrome, okay, not Firefox, and certainly not Internet Explorer. Blah. Use Chrome. But anyway, so I'm going to click duplicate. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a report and I'm going to memorize it. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to reports. Follow me here. Just don't ask questions. Just follow me. We're going to go to the profit and loss. I'm going to make the date range all dates. So this is basically a P&L of all transactions from the beginning of time. I want this to be a P&L for a grant. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to customize this report so it only includes transactions pointed to a specific grant, in this case, the RAC Foundation, and then I'm going to memorize it, okay? So I'm going to go to customize. I'm going to go to filter. I'm going to go to donor. Now, you could check the box, but you really don't have to. Just click on this, click the grant. I'll click the grant that I'm looking at. There it is right there. And then I'll run the report. So I'm probably going to want to change the title of it too. So I'm going to customize it again. I'm going to go down to the header footer. And then where it says profit and loss, I'm going to put the name of the grant, which is RAC 24. We're almost ready. You need the most important part I want to show you. Click run report. All right. So now I'm going to save this report so that whenever I need it, I go to reports, I go to custom, and I can click on it right there, and it'll just pop up immediately. Now, why is there no transactions in here? Why is there nothing on the report? Put it in the chat. Why is there nothing in the report? It's a new grant. I haven't entered any transactions yet, right? All right, so what I'm going to do is now I'm going to do the different ways that you enter transactions. Now, we've got a whole 3-day webinar series showing you how to enter transactions in all the different ways and why it is you'd want to do different ways. But I'm just going to go ahead and enter a few. Plus new. First, for those of you that write checks, does anybody write and print checks out of QuickBooks? Yes, we're doing the budget later, not yet. All right. So I'm going to click checks and I'm going to do a check. Hold on 1 second. I have to get my little cheat sheet out. Okay. So let's say we're writing a check for printing. So it's Kinko's. And the check is for printing. And it's for the Guidance Center, and it's paid for out of the RAC grant. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and save and close. I'm going to go back over to this report. I'm going to refresh the report. And now you're going to see that the report doesn't have anything on it. What if that's not very impressive? Am I on the wrong one? Hold on. Yeah, let me. Okay, here we go. Okay, so one thing I did not do is I didn't put any dollar amounts on it. Let me go ahead and go back to that check. I'm in such a hurry because I want to go to break. We probably should just go to break. I'm going to spend like 1 more minute on this and then I'll go to break. Let me go back. Yeah, I forgot to put a dollar amount on it. What an idiot. Okay, so I'm going to put $1,000. I'm going to save and close. And now when I go back over to the report and refresh it, now there's going to be $1,000. Okay. Now, the person or people that want to know about splitting transactions, absolutely. I'm going to go to a bill. Now, you can split transactions on bills, checks, and not everyone uses bills, but I want to show you all the different ways of doing this. And so let's say that we're paying, I don't know, we're paying for health insurance. So I'll just pick somebody that we're paying health insurance to. We'll say that's an insurance company. And this is health insurance. So I'm going to point this to health insurance. This is health insurance company paid. And let's say the total amount is $1,500, but let's say only half of it. Okay, so 1,500 times 0.5 tab equals 750 is paid for out of the RAC grant right there. And it's for the Guidance Center. But the rest of the health insurance, the other 750 isn't paid for out of a grant, but it's still going for the Guidance Center. Well, let's say that it is paid for out of a grant. Let's say that it's going to the Bill Sims Foundation grant. So the person who wanted to know, can you split a transaction so that it's going to the same program, but it's paid for out of different grants? Yes, you can. It's all going to the Guidance Center, but half is going to this grant and half is going to that grant. Okay, so that's one thing. I'm going to go ahead and save and close that. I know not everybody does bills, but you can do the same thing on checks. If you use debit or credit card transactions and you want to enter things manually, the expense tab right here, this is where you go to enter transactions. And let's do one for some consulting. Let's say Erica Gray, they did some consulting for us. And that consulting was $3,000, but $2,000 of it was paid for out of this grant, RAC. And it was for the Guidance Center, but the other consulting that we had them do, the other $1,000 was not paid for out of a grant. So you can either leave this blank, or what I do is I created a customer called unfunded, a make-believe customer called unfunded. And the reason why I do that is so now anytime I enter an expense, I always have to put something in the account. I always have to put something in the class, and now I always am able to put something in the donor or project, or yours might say customers. So this will say was paid for admin costs. Okay, we just had them do some extra work. So I'm going to go ahead and save a close. You can split all you want, and now you can see here's printing, here's consulting, here's health insurance. Now some of you use, or probably a lot of you, use the download feature. So this is where you go. And again, we have a whole topic on how to download transactions. If you're using QuickBooks and you're not using the bank feeds and downloading transactions, you're really missing out. because that's one of the best features of QuickBooks. Okay. But here is an expense account that I'll download. Let's see. I just got to find something here and get something that has some actual real dollars in it. Well, this one's big. I don't know why it's the QuickBooks, but anyway, I can click split and I have the same ability. Okay. I can put this to whatever it may be. I'll put this to rent. We'll say this is the rent on the space. And we'll say that some of it goes for the guidance center. And the part that goes to the guidance center is paid for out of that RAC grant. I can just start typing. And the amount here we'll say is, I don't know, $4,500. And then we'll say the rest of the rent is paid for admin. And this grant doesn't pay for it. No grant does. So I have it as unfunded. There we go. And that's the rest of it. Now I can look and see that I've got, the total is 8218. I allocated 4,500. I got 3718.47 left. So I don't even have to do the math here. 3718.47 left. All right. And then I'm going to go ahead and apply and accept. What if your funder gives you 10% for overhead? So we can talk about that at the end. Matthew says, any objection to using a different term rather than unfunded? No, you can use whatever term you want. Does rent paid for RAC grant then get classified as a program expense rather than admin? Depends upon what the grant's for. Rents typically are part of a larger group of expenses called facility costs that absolutely should be allocated between program, admin, and fundraising. And you do that based on square footage. And I'm going to talk about auto allocating those things at the end. Okay. But let's go back to our report, wherever our report is. Where is our report? Hopefully it's still somewhere in here. I'm just going back until I get to it. Hopefully I can get to it. If not, I'll have to pull it up again. Maybe it was over here. Let me see. There it is. Okay. So, and then there's the rent, the 4,500. Now, how many of you have reimbursement-based grants? Put something in the chat if you have a reimbursement-based grant. Okay. So can you see that this report tells you how much you're going to get reimbursement for? All right. So when we get back, I'm going to show you how to enter revenue for the grant, and I'm going to show you how to enter the payroll for a grant. Okay. But before we do that, it's time for you to decide what you want to hear. Okay. So we have Sky Full of Stars by Coldplay, which I may have played already. Sky Fall by Adele. Let's Dance by David Bowie. Got to Be Real by Cheryl Lynn. And I Put a Spell on You by Nina. I feel like I already played that yesterday, but I may not have. But anyway, it's fairly obvious. Yes, ma'am, Allison, whatever you say is what I'll do. People's like, damn it. Can we leave it blank instead of using unfunded? Gabriella, if you leave that field blank, then people are going to blow it off if somebody else is doing data entry. So I would prefer for you to always put something in this field. Okay. So let's see. Becky was looking for a book, QuickBooks Nonprofit for Dummies. I don't have it as a book, but I have the on-demand training. So if you go to and this is really true for anybody, if you go to QuickBooksMadeEasy.com and you click on demand training right there, you will see something called the bundle. This is a streamable training product. You have access to it for the rest of your life. I'm the guy teaching it. You can share it with everybody. It becomes the Bible for your organization, and it teaches you everything you need to know about QuickBooks and accounting if you are a nonprofit. It's 16 hours of learning. It's $3.99 normally. We're going to give it to you for $100 off. It's only going to be $298. And I'll give you the coupon code for that now. let's go back in here. The coupon code for it is NPQ298. It's normally $400. If you put NPQ298, you'll be able to get that bundle. Some people, they don't like doing these webinars. They want to be able to learn on their own. That's what this is for. And it's a lot more learning than what we get in the live webinar class. Okay. Let's see. I'm a newbie to QuickBooks. What do you recommend? 3-day webinar or on demand? I would do the on demand if you're brand new. Yeah, I would do. Okay. Is there a general course for QB 101 in general? Yes, that's the bundle. And what's beautiful about it is it teaches you from the standpoint of a nonprofit. Okay. Will you be covering reporting for restricted funds on financial statements? Yes. All right. So Paige, you want to come on the line and we'll see if there's any other questions that I need to talk about before I finish up. We've got time to do questions. We've got 50 minutes left, 40 minutes left. I've got a few more things I need to teach. It's probably going to take about 20 minutes. And then we're going to go crazy with the questions, okay? The bundles are the streamable videos, not books, all right? Anybody else, Paige, anything we need to talk about?
There are a lot of questions kind of flying around about the restricted fund stuff. And I'll just say, since you're going to have time at the end for questions, you know, maybe if everybody will kind of hang out with you and if you want to teach and then open the floor after.
Yeah, we'll do that. So the restricted funds, which is not restricted grants, we'll cover that. Okay. All right. So let's see. Somebody wants to know where I am. I'm right here. Let's see. I'm in Atlanta. That is not me. That's a virtual background. Linda wants to know why you can't use Internet Explorer. The gods at Intuit say Google Chrome is going to give you a better experience. I don't have a better answer than that. All right. Let's see. Kevin gives us a comment that using a name like unfunded allows you to run an unfunded report and see the detail of what's on it. Then if you forgot a grant altogether, it'll come up as unclassified and you can go to the customer report and correct it. Yeah, that's a really good point. If you forgot to point something to a grant, if you point everything, then we can do a report. I'll go to standard and it's called a P&L by donor or customer. And you do it for whatever time period you want. Anything that's unfunded is right here. And then if you decide you need to point it, you can point it. If you forget to point it to something altogether, I'm going to click one of these and I'm going to undo it altogether. I'm just going to not put something here. This is what he's saying. Then when you look at a P&L, you go back here, it's going to appear in a column called, well, it should be called unclassified. That's interesting. Did I not save that transaction? Let me just get some more here. Okay. There we go. Not specified. That's where it'll appear. And then you can repoint it. Okay. All right. So I really want to finish where I was at before I just start taking all kinds of questions, because the two big things that we haven't talked about yet is we've not talked about entering the income for it. And we've also not talked about entering the payroll. And those are two things that I think are really important, okay? Now, let's talk about entering payroll first, all right? Now, I want you to stop what you're doing. Don't ask any questions and just listen to me real quick, because this is a big deal, okay? Yes, we'll do the budget as well after we do this. All right. So when it comes to payroll, that often is the biggest pain of all, because payroll needs to be allocated to program admin and fundraising, as well as to grants. Now, if you are with an outside payroll company, or if you are with the internal QuickBooks payroll, you are still, in both cases, going to have to do some sort of adjustment to enter your payroll and get it split. All right. So who is using QuickBooks to do their payroll? Please put it in the chat. Who is doing QuickBooks to do their payroll? Okay. Now I'm going to tell you right now, accountants and bookkeepers that know QuickBooks really well, we hate the QuickBooks online payroll. And one of the reasons why we hate it is because it will not let us split pay between grants and between programs. It won't let us do it. Okay. And so unfortunately, instead, what we have to do, this is what I'm telling you to do, point all of the payroll to the admin class. All right. And don't even worry about pointing it to a grant. And then what you're going to want to do, and this is just for those of you using the online payroll, at the end of the month, you're going to need to do a journal entry. You go to where the journal entries are. You're going to have to do a journal entry that is going to basically allocate salaries and wages, the portion that goes to the grant, to that grant. Let's say it's going to be $5,600. And you'll have to figure it out yourself in an Excel document. It sucks, okay? So, but if this is the way it is when it comes to allocating payroll, if you're in the online edition, okay? And then we'll say the payroll taxes, well, it wouldn't be that much. It'd probably be something like that. And this will go to the grant. We'll put this to the RAC Foundation. And this would be a huge entry, okay? You do the entry once a month. It would be a huge entry. Now, again, this is only for those of you that are using QuickBooks Payroll to do your payroll. And we'll say this much is going to the Bill Sims Foundation. And then we would have the payroll taxes for that. Let's see, we'll say 152, and you have to get this from a spreadsheet that you would create, okay? I put it to the parent, I needed to put it there. And then you would do the same thing for class. Now I'm just gonna put it all the guidance center, but you can see this journal entry is basically the total of the payroll, and it's gonna get allocated to all these different grants and classes. Now, the other side of it, 6560, is going to be credited. So you'll see salaries is $5,600 and the $1,000, so that's $6,600. So we're going to credit $6,600 to whatever the grant and class is that we used when we pointed the original payroll, so that it basically makes it go down. We'll say we pointed all the payroll to an unfunded grant, and we pointed it all to admin. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the payroll taxes, 65, 67. You can see how complicated this is. It sucks. And we're going to credit all of the debits we did to payroll taxes. We're going to credit payroll taxes, and we're going to credit it again to whatever the account is, and whatever the grant is and whatever the class is that we pointed stuff when they originally went in, okay? So we have, if you look, salaries went up by 56 plus 1,000, salaries went up by 66 and went down by 66. Payroll taxes went up by, it looks like 672 or 677 and went down by 677, payroll taxes did. So this won't affect your books at all. Salaries goes up, salaries goes down, payroll taxes goes up, payroll taxes goes down. But now when I look at my reports, I'm going to go ahead and save this. Now, here's the salaries right there, and here's the payroll taxes. Okay. Yes, it's just a reclassification. That's right. Now, the vast majority of you are not using QuickBooks Payroll. You're using ADP, you're using Paychex, use Paycor. Put it in the chat. What are you guys using? I want to know. Wow, I've never heard of Zenefits. ADP, SurePay, Paychex, ADP. So you guys have drafts that come out of the payroll, and they a lot of times are just part of your bank feeds. What I suggest you do is enter a journal entry. Some people can do a write check for it, but do a journal entry that matches those drafts. Okay. So I'm going to click on the, and I memorize it. So I memorize the journal entry. So if I go to the gear and I click on recurring transactions, this is where my memorized transactions are. And I'll show you how to memorize a transaction in a minute. But you'll want to have a memorized transaction for your payroll draft. And the memorized transaction, it won't be reclassifying. It'll be basically putting the draft in at the very beginning. I call it a payroll entry. And this is where you would say, okay, this amount is going to the RAT grant. This amount of the gross pay is going to this grant. This amount is unfunded, okay? But, and you'd have to do the same thing with the payroll taxes as well. This amount, and this is obviously a pain. And to figure out what numbers to put in here, you're going to need to keep an Excel spreadsheet with your payroll so that you know how to split them. And then you'll put the numbers in here. Now, I can work with you to help you get figured out about what that spread needs to be. Some people say, Greg, I refuse to do this. I'm just going to do one lump entry at the end of the year to get it fixed. Okay. It is a pain. And if it's a pain for you, then you're doing it right. Okay. Do not put the employee's name here. That is a bad idea. You have a payroll company. That's why you don't need the names in here. You lump these. This 10,008 is made up of half of one person's pay, a quarter of another person's pay. You don't want names in here of people. Somebody might get a hold of that, and then they know how much people make. I don't do that. You need this field to put the grant. Okay. All right. So the payroll taxes, this is for the employer's share of payroll liabilities. This is going to be the gross pay. This is going to be the employer's shares of payroll liabilities. This is how much is taken out of the bank account. Some payroll companies do one draft for both. Some companies do two drafts. If you do two drafts, then whatever the draft is, and you can get it from the payroll report, say 10,000 of it is the net check draft, and then the rest of it is the draft for the payroll taxes. But you want to enter them in the way they actually leave the bank account so you can do a bank run. What is a draft? So a draft is where a company takes money out of your bank account for you, and you don't write a check to make that happen. Okay, some people call it an EFT, electronic funds transfer. Okay, and payroll companies do that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to, first of all, save this entry. And then to memorize it, once you put the entry in here once, you see where this says make recurring? You click it, you name it. This is my payroll entry. And then don't schedule it, just make it unscheduled, and then click Save Template. And now, whenever you want to do your payroll entry, you just click recurring transactions. It'll pull it up. There's the payroll entry that I just entered. You click Use. If you need to change the numbers, you change the numbers. If not, you can just leave them the same. You just change the date range and save and close. Now let's take a look at our report to see if the payroll information got there or not. All right. So yes, salaries and wages have definitely come up. Now, if you have a reimbursement grant, then this may be the very first report you look at. It just has a bunch of negatives. But many of you get advances on your grants. They say, congratulations, here's some of it, here's all of it. So I want to talk about how to enter the revenue. Now, there are many different ways to enter revenue in QuickBooks. And I'm not here to teach you why you would enter one or the other. That's what my 3-day webinar series for and what On Demand is for. But I will tell you that as long as you enter your income and put the name of the grantor there, it'll appear on this report. Now, some people like to enter their income as soon as they find out about the fact they got the grant. Even before they received any money, they want to book it. In other words, they want to do accrual-based accounting. They want to book all the revenue as soon as they found out about it, like an outstanding receivable. Who are you? Put it in the chat. Who wants to invoice for your grants? Go ahead and put it in the chat. Okay, that's what a CPA will tell you to do. I know a lot of people don't do it. If you don't do it, don't worry about it. But if you want to do that, you would simply do an invoice like you normally do. Here, I'll do an invoice. You put the name of the grantor right there. All right. And then you use product services on invoice. They'll say it's a foundation grant. And it was, we'll say 50,000 was the whole thing. And it was for the guidance center. And I'm going to save and close. And now there's my 50,000. Okay. Now, can you split the 50K? You certainly can. If you want to split it between different classes, maybe only 25 of it is going to go for the guidance center. And the rest of this grant, foundation grant, is going to go to another program. That does happen. We'll say this is for the Synergy Conference, and we'll save and close. All right. Now, some people wait until they get the money in, and that's when they book it. They're more cash basis. Okay. If that's you, put it in the chat. Who does, so if it's not, if you get grants, store it that aren't for a program, then point it to admin or fundraising. Okay, so those of you that wait until it's received, then you too can book it. Now there's a couple of ways to book it. You can do a sales receipt. Who does sales receipts? Put it in the chat. Who does sales receipts? Anybody do sales receipts? All right. So if you wait until you receive it, as long as you put the name of the grantor, it'll be there. Okay. Some people don't do any of the sales forms at all. Instead, they go to Plus New and they just enter it as a bank deposit. Who are the people that do the bank deposit? If that's you, you put the rack right there. Okay. Okay. So now if you're saying, I don't know which way I should use yet, I'm new to QuickBooks, put that in the chat. Who has no idea which way to do it because they're new to QuickBooks? I don't want you to feel left out. Okay. That's what you need training for. So I can teach you the benefits and problems with doing each one of those methods. Now there's one more way of entering donations, and that is you don't do a sales form. You don't do it manually. You download it from the bank. And if you download it from the bank, I'll click here. Again, this is a deposit, but over here, I put that rack and it appears here. So those are all the different ways to enter it. All right. So the point is that no matter how you do it, you'll be able to get your P&L. Okay. Now, here's the thing. This P&L is just for this grant, and it's showing us that we have 50,000. We've gotten in 26, or spent. I'm sorry, we spent 26. We've got 23 left. It would be nice if this would give us not just one grant, but it would give us all of our restricted grants. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to click customize. And I'm going to go to filters. And rather than filter for the one grant, I'm going to filter for the Bill Sims Foundation grant as well. I'm going to filter for the Rack Foundation grant. And I'm going to filter for the Villa Foundation grant. I'm going to filter for all of them. I'm going to click Run Report. And now what that's giving me is all of my restricted grants and what I have left to spend on all of them, which is 34,000. Now, this is okay, but I would really like to have a separate column for each grant. So I'm going to go over here to display columns by, and I'm going to click on donors. Yours might say members or clients or customers. And that's what the columns are. I'll zoom in so you can see this. And now I'm going to click Run Report. And now it's giving me how much for the Bill Sims Foundation, how much for Rack, and how much for the Villa Foundation. It's really very cool. Okay. Now, I want to change the title of this report. So I'm going to click on the Customize button, and I'm going to go to where header footer is at the bottom, and I'm going to call it My Restricted Grants Report. I want to spell it right. All right. So here's the restricted grants report right there. And the beautiful part about it is that I can see how much I have left on each and every grant. All right. And I can see it at a moment's notice. So I've memorized this. I can pull it up whenever I need. When I'm right in the middle of entering transactions, I can see whether there's money left for a grant. And so I know where to point it. So I think it's very, very cool. Now, trying to think of what else I wanted to say about this. I think, okay. Now, another thing is the budget. All right, so let's do the budget. So let me make sure I save that. Did I save that? I don't know if I did. My restricted grant report. It's late. I'm getting tired, folks. All right. So I'll save that. So entering a budget. Now, how many of you have entered budgets before? How many of you have entered budgets before? Okay. So if you don't know how to enter budgets, I highly suggest you either get the demand training or you sign up for the 3-day webinar. But I'm going to go to the gear and I'm going to click budgeting. And I'm going to stop talking about telling you to go to something else because you paid for this and it's starting to sound obnoxious. I apologize. So I click on budgeting. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click add budget. And I'm going to do a budget for that grant. Rack grant. Okay. Now, this is where people get freaked out because they're like, am I going to enter a budget? It wants me to enter a budget by fiscal year. Listen, don't worry about that. I know your grant year may be different from your fiscal year. Don't worry about that. What I want you to do when you're entering the budget, simply pick whatever fiscal year includes the first month of the first grant year. So if it's a 1-year grant that starts in July of 22, then you pick the 22-23 fiscal year, okay? If it's a grant, maybe even though your year begins in July and starts in June, the grant year begins in January, fine. If it starts January of 2024, then you will pick this one. If it's January of 25, you'll pick this one, okay? Click it. Now, this is the important thing. To segregate this budget from your overall budget, this budget has nothing to do with your overall budget. If you're thinking it's a piece of your overall budget, you're wrong. It's a separate budget. And to separate it, you click this and you click subdivide by donor. And I click it and I put the grant that I want to enter a budget for. I'm going to go ahead and check that box. And then I click next. And then it starts, we said, in January. So I'm going to put my budget in here. So this is going to be 50,000. And the salaries are, where are salaries? Here's salaries are 25,000. And this could be a budget for more than a year. This could be a budget for 3 years. Just put the whole 3 years in the first month of the first year. Payroll taxes, 2,500. Health insurance, 2,500. Rent is, where is rent? Here's rent up here is 12,000. And printing is 3,000. And then consulting is 5,000. There's your budget for the grant. It may have been something you just did on your own. It may be something that got approved by the funder and it's an appendix on the grant. Anyway, once it's saved, now let me show you how you get a report. You go to the gear, you go to where your budgets are. Here's your rack budget right there. I click it and I click run a budget versus actual. Now, the first time you do this, it's going to give you every single name in your customer list. I wish it would just give you the rack grant because that's the only one that has a budget in here, but it does not. It gives you everything, which is quite ridiculous, all right? And so what we need to do is we need to customize this report so that it's only going to give us the rack grant. So I'm going to go to filter. I'm going to go to donor. I'm going to put rack. And once we get this done, we're going to memorize it. And then I'm going to click run report. So now all it does, now it doesn't, it looks like I picked the wrong one. So hold on a second. It looks like I have more than one in here because I'm not seeing any actuals. Let me back the date range up to all dates. You can do that because the grant may take place over more than 1 year. So here's your budget and here's your actual. Now, as you can tell, and this may be what somebody was asking a while ago, this report is giving me the rack. It's giving me, that's a parent account, our parent customer. This is the sub, and then it's giving me the total, and then it's duplicating it again over here. I'm going to go to customize, and that's because the grid says show account versus donors, but there's only one donor on here. So I can click it and just say, give me account versus total. I'm going to click run report. And now I've got the actual versus budget. You can see that for rent, our budget's 12. We've spent 4,500. We have 7,500 left. All right. So I'm going to memorize this, save customization, and I'll call this my rack budget to actual. And I click save. And now whenever I want it, it's up here in reports. and custom reports, and there is the rack budget to actual. I pop it up, and there it is. Okay. Let's see. Why do you put the entire budget amounts in the first month of the first grant year instead of spreading it out to the months when you expect to incur the expense? You can if you want to, but I always want my budget column to be the entire period. And you'll get that even if you spread it. I just think it's easier to put it in the first month. So Matthew, you can do it the other way if you'd like. So there's one more thing that I have to teach. And then there's two more things I have to teach. And then there's those funds that people want to know about. So let me teach the thing that I know is the most important. I'm going to change to a different data file. We're going to run a few minutes long. I thought we had time. Apparently we don't. It's my bad. I talk too slow. But I'm going to switch to a different company. And what I want to show you is the problem that happens on your P&L budget to actual when you get grants in that are for next year. So here is a report that I would give to the board. And I got a grant in right at the end of the year, but it's restricted for a future year. But yet I booked it as income. The reason why I did it is because accountants like me to do that. Accountants are going to tell you they want you to book all restricted revenues into income immediately. So anyway, it looks like I made $17,000 when in reality I didn't. It's because when you go to foundations, you'll see I've got 110 there. I only have 89 there. That's because, look, we got extra grants. And you're like, no, I didn't get extra grants. It's because you got that one grant for next year in this year. So I'm going to double click on this and I'll show you. Here's the grant that's actually for next year, 2021, when we're looking at a 1920 P&L. But this was received, and so I booked it into income because that's what I do with my money. When I get money in, I book it into income, and that's what my auditor told me to do it. But now it makes it look like I've got income when I really don't. Now, that's the problem. Y'all know what I'm talking about? I assume you know what I'm talking about because it screws up your budget to actuals. Dominica, later, all right? All right, y'all know what I'm talking about? Because this is money that's really for the future. And it screws up your budget to actual. So I want to give you a couple of ways of dealing with it, okay? A couple of different ways of dealing with this. Now, I want you to listen very carefully. If it is not a reimbursement-based grant, if it is not a reimbursement-based grant, your auditor is going to tell you that they want it on your P&L. But I don't want it lumped in with the rest of my P&L because it makes it look like I made a bunch of money. So what I am suggesting that you do, and let me go ahead and duplicate this screen. What I'm suggesting that you do, I'm going to go to plus new, is I'm suggesting that you do a journal entry at the end of the month to move the money that is actually earmarked for a future year, to move it out of the regular income account where you put it into and put it into a new account on the P&L, but its own separate account, and call it restricted grants for future. Now, when you create the account, the type of account is other income. It's not income, it's other income. And other income accounts appear all the way down at the bottom of the P&L. All right? Separate from your regular income. So I'm going to go ahead and make this entry as of the last day of the month or maybe you just do this the last day of the year. People usually do it at the end of each month. I'm going to save and close this entry. And now when I go back to my report, looks like I've made 17. I'm going to refresh. I'm getting there, girl. I'm getting there. All right. Now, as you can tell, this has gone down. And look what happens. I see net income, but there's the restricted grants for revenue for future down here. So what happens is now you can budget. Your budget doesn't look screwed up. All right. And you really only made $200, but this is still in the P&L. Now, those of you want to know why it's on the P&L at all, some people say, I want to make it a liability, okay? Who are you? Who are the people that want to make it deferred revenue or a liability? Put it on there. Speak up. I want to know who you are. Go ahead. All right. All right. Now, let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. If you do not care about generally accepted accounting principles, if you don't do audits, if you don't want to do things correctly, okay? Maybe you don't get an audit, you just don't care, all right? Yes, you can make it a liability, okay? If you are talking about a restricted grant, though, technically, the gods of accounting, in America at least, maybe not in Canada, but in America, want you to put it on the P&L. They just want you to put it segregated out. And if you don't, the auditor is going to ding you for it at the end of the year. Now, I have good news. I have good news for those of you that have reimbursement-based grants, okay? If you get a grant that is reimbursement-based, that means the grant is a conditional grant, okay? A conditional grant is a grant that has two big barriers. Well, there's two big things that make a grant a conditional grant. A conditional grant means one thing. It means that there's a big barrier that you have to overcome before you can get the money. And if you don't overcome that barrier, you owe the money back to the organization that gave it to you. It has to be a measurable barrier. It can't be a barrier like spend it in this program. It has to be measurable. Reimbursement grants are very measurable. You don't earn this money until you spend it. So with reimbursement-based grants are conditional grants. They're also restricted, but they're conditional. So reimbursement-based grants, you can make liabilities. You can put it as a liability account, all right? And the income that comes in advance. And then as you earn the money, you simply move it on to the P&L up here at the top where the regular revenues are, okay? All right. All right, so I think, can you elaborate on what are reimbursement grants? Okay, yeah, and then you would reverse it the next period, Sherry, that's right. A reimbursement-based grant, that's a grant where you have to spend the money and tell them how you spent the money by line item before you can get reimbursement for it. So they're simply reimbursing you for the expenses. Sometimes for those grants they give you in advance, those can be made unearned liability, okay? All right, so we've got 4 minutes left, which is really unfortunate because I wanted to teach you about the funds. So I think what I'm gonna do is the following. Oh, projects, we had to do that as well. Okay, so I'm going to say this. I'm going to run about 10 minutes long, all right? Is there anybody that has to leave right now? Put it in the chat. Who has to leave right now? All right? You're going to get a recording, okay? But I just want you to know that be sure that you write down these codes to get the training, the bundle. It's NPQ 298, NPQ 298, right there. And you'll be able to get on-demand training for, instead of $400, you'll be able to get it for $298. Some people want tech support. They want to be able to either call me or Paige or Barb. You can call all of us. We can even dial into the software. We can even create appointments and remote in and help you with your QuickBooks issues. It's $499 for a year. We're giving it to you for $299. That's $200 off. NPQ TS 299. NPQ TS 299. Thing about those codes, they're only good till Saturday night at midnight. All right. If you want to go to the 3-day webinar series, the code is NPQ 40 off. NPQ 40 off. When this webinar is over and you get the evaluation, be sure to say that you want my little quick tips newsletter. I'll give you a little video once a month teaching you how to do something in QuickBooks. This 3-day webinar, it's happening on May 31st, 1st, and 2nd from 2 to 4:30. Okay, and it'll be just like this. All right. This coupon code, I think it does expire on Saturday. I'm not sure. You probably want to go ahead and sign up for it. Okay. All right. So let's see. I think I'm going to move on now because those people, there's still 226 people on the call. So there's a couple of other things I need to teach you. The last thing I need to teach you about tracking your restricted grants is I want you to use customer job, okay? But you may hear people out in the bookkeeping world talk about using projects, okay? Now, I'm going to go to my little slide deck here because I need to explain to you what projects are. All right. Now, just hang with me here because people get really confused about this. A project is a sub-customer with an extra designation. Your projects, if you decide to have projects in QuickBooks Online, all they are names that are in the customer list or donor list that are sub-customers, and you've given them an extra designation, okay? Now, another way of talking about it with a picture, if these are all of your sub-customers, and what I mean by sub-customers is these are all of the names that are in the customers. Yours might say donors. These are all the names in here that are sub-customers, all right? And actually, let's go back to a different data file where I've got this working better. We'll go right here. All right. So let's go to the customer list, donors, and everybody that's a sub-customer, like this one here that we entered, this one here, these are sub-customers, okay? So if those are sub-customers, a project is a sub-customer that has been given an extra designation. Projects are actually still in your customer list. They really are, okay? I'm going to show you how you can see them. If you go to this little tiny gear right here, let me zoom in so you can see it. This little tiny gear, not the big one, not that big one, but this little one down here. If you click on it, you'll see something that says include projects. So if you check that box, anything that is a project will be included. It's the same exact list, okay? Once you make something a customer, like I did with this, a sub-customer, you can turn it into a project. So I'm going to turn the project feature on by going over to account and settings. And I'm going to go over to advanced, and you'll see something that says projects. You want to turn yours on. Okay. If yours is off, you just like that, you just click the thing to turn it on. Once it's on, then you can add projects. You'll get this little thing that says projects right there. You'll click it. And if you click this drop down that says new project, you'll see it says convert from sub customer, or if yours says donors, it'll say sub donors or sub client, whatever your name is in your list for the people that give you money. You click it, and anybody that's a sub customer, you can check them off and convert, and now they will be a project. Now, that changes absolutely nothing in terms of what I taught you. Everything I taught you, when you go to enter transactions, we'll do a check here. This says donor / project. You can pick it, you can still pick it here. When you're entering donations, whether you do the bank deposit or the sales receipt or the invoice or what have you, in the receipt from line, it'll still appear. There it is, even though it's a project. You can still get budget to actual reports for it. If I go to my memorized reports, even though it is a project, I'm still able to get the budget to actual for it. Let me just click on it. This is a project now. It still has information in it. So why do we even do projects? Here's why you do projects, okay? This is what's cool about it. I don't even think it's that cool, but I'm teaching it to you because there's always people that want to know. When you click on projects, it's going to give you this neat little screen with all your grants on it. That's it. And so you'll have income and costs right there. Now, when you click on one of them, you'll get a P&L for it, but that P&L will be the same as the P&L that you could get the other way. And if you wanted to look at it compared to a budget, you're going to have to go to your old budget report. So it just basically gives you an extra screen that you can look at your. It's kind of nice because all your grants are in the same place. It's kind of nice. And when you're done with a grant, like say this one's done, it's from a prior year, I can delete it and it goes away. So that's really all there is about that. Okay. All right. So let's see, Allison, I hear you. So we've got 203 people on here. So who wanted to know about tracking the designate or tracking funds? Who wanted to know about tracking funds? All right. Okay, cool. So I need you to understand something. A designated fund is kind of like a mini program. It is. It's kind of like a mini program. And so what I would do, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a different data file to set this up. Go to a different data file here. And this is the kind of stuff that you get that's taught in the on-demand training, and also you can get it with tech support. I'm going to run a P&L by class. Okay. Here's my P&L by class. All right. So somebody give me, Veronica, what do we mean by tracking funds? All right, Veronica. So what this is if your nonprofit, let me give you an example. I had a nonprofit that was and this could be good for everybody. I have a nonprofit that is a neighborhood association. And they have a rec center and all this stuff. It's a pretty big neighborhood association. A big tornado came through Atlanta a few years back, and it destroyed a number of the homes in their neighborhood. They started a tornado fund, and people would contribute to the fund, And then the fund could be used to cover the deductibles for the insurance so that people could cover the deductible and get their homes fixed quicker. All right. Actually, the executive director put the money in a separate bank account, didn't tell anybody about it, and stole the money and left the state, but that's a different story. The point is, that's a fund. And for that time, it's kind of like a little mini program that the organization created. All right. Now, this is different from designated funds for house of worship. Okay. These are the funds where you're getting it from multiple, you get multiple people giving donations. So what I'm suggesting that you do is you go into your chart of accounts list and go to where the classes are. It's under all lists. Go to classes and create a class for the fund. So I'm just going to edit this one that I created earlier, and I'm going to call it the Tornado Fund. Okay. And I'm going to make this a subclass under the Guidance Center because it's really kind of part of my overall program, but it's something that I need to track separately. An endowment would be a class, but you know, all you do is get money in, you never pay any money out of an endowment. Okay. No, Celine, absolutely not. A fund never gets spent within the year. It can take years. That's the whole point. And that's what I'm going to teach you. So hold on 1 second, and this is going to blow your mind, and then we're going to finish. Now, I need to enter a couple of transactions. So I'm just going to I'll enter one donation that somebody gave, and I will put it to as an individual donation, individual contribution, but it's for the Tornado Fund. Okay. Now, if you want to have a separate income account for it because you don't want it to screw up the rest of your budget, I'm okay with that. But the main thing that you're going to use to track it is the class. You might also have a separate income account for it. Okay. I'm going to save and close that. Although I need to put a dollar amount in, I almost forgot. We'll say this person gave $20,000. I'm going to save and close. Okay. And then I'm going to write a check. Let's say that I gave somebody money out of the fund, or I used it for the project. Okay. So we'll point it to whatever the expense account is. Now, you may have an expense account for it. I'll say $1,500. And the point is, we're going to take it out of that Tornado Fund, which is kind of like a mini program of the organization. Okay. So now when I run a P&L, I'm going to run a P&L by class. All right. And I've got to make the date range larger. So I have some transactions in here, the ones I just entered. And now you'll see, here's the Tornado Fund. Now, as you can tell, it has the revenue, it has the expense, that's the balance in the fund. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to customize this report so that the only class that appears is that Tornado Fund. Okay. And as a matter of fact, I think what I'm going to do is just start with a standard P&L. When you only want one class to appear, it's usually better to start with just a P&L. Make it all dates. Run. And then customize it so it only gives you the Tornado Fund. I'm going to click filter. I'm going to filter by class, and I'm going to say I only want the Tornado Fund. Should be in here. There it is, right there. Run report. So this report, even though it bled between multiple years, this report is going to tell me how much money is left in the Tornado Fund, and you would memorize that report. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay, cool. All right. Could you just use tags? Tags suck, Tom. Don't use tags. Yes, you could set up a budget for it because you have classes. That's right. Okay, cool. So the last thing that I want to point out is that for those of you that download transactions, you stayed here to the bitter end, all 182 of you. So I'm going to give you this extra thing. It's only for people that download transactions. If you don't know how to do this, you need to be downloading your transactions. But these are transactions from the bank. Actually, you know what? I need to go back to a different data file. Go to a different data file where I've already got it set up. Okay. So let's see here. It looks like all of the descriptions on here are Intuit. So that's a little strange. I need to show you a different data file and really to make this be really cool. But all right, what I want to teach you is rules. So what happens is, just a real quick and dirty, if you link your bank to QuickBooks, QuickBooks downloads transactions and it puts them in this place that you're looking at. It's like a waiting room. And then you can add the transactions to QuickBooks. If the transactions are already in there, it'll match them to transactions that are already there. It's awesome. But anyway, so it tries to guess where you want to point stuff, because people use this for debit and credit card transactions, because those are ones that you don't usually find out about them until after they cleared the bank. Well, if they come from the download, then you can just add them then. And QuickBooks has these rules. It tries to suggest where to point stuff. So if you've got a vendor, we'll say Intuit, that every time, it wouldn't be Intuit, it'd probably be your rent or your gas company or electric company, where every time you pay them, you want 20% of it to go to admin, 20% of it to go to fundraising, and the other 60% to go to programs. If that's what you want, you can get the rules to do that for you automatically. So I'm going to click over to rules, and I'm going to click new rule, and I'm going to name the rule, name it Intuit. Okay. And then I'm going to say, whenever a transaction comes down from the bank and it's going out of my bank account, and the description contains the word Intuit, these descriptions come down from the bank, I'm going to say, please always point it to, it will act like it's rent. Please point it to rent. Okay. But I want to add a split, and I'm going to say point 60% of it to rent for the guidance center. I'm going to say put 20% of it to rent for the admin class. And then I'm going to add another split, and I have the other 20% go to rent for fundraising. So now every time it sees Intuit, it's going to split it 60, 20, 20 to these different classes. Okay. Now, it may automatically confirm the transaction. Always make sure to uncheck that so that you can at least see what it's doing before you click to add it to your QuickBooks file. But I'm going to click Save. I'm going to go back to where all the transactions are, and you'll see all the Intuits have already been, it's already been decided where they're going to go. I'll just click on this one, and you can edit the split. And see, out of the 1250, it puts 750 to the guidance center, 250 to admin, and 250 to fundraising. Whereas if I look at this 3825, it's put 2295 to the guidance center, 765 to admin. Isn't that kind of amazing? Isn't that amazing? So, and then you simply click add. and it adds it to your QuickBooks. Okay. It's really very cool. All right. So it's 17 minutes over. I think I'm going to be done. Paige, is there anything in particular? Okay, Allison, she's asked 4 times now. How do I use special accounts to represent fringe, indirect, and admin? Okay, so Allison, I think we need to talk because I need to know more about what you're trying to do. All right. For instance, when you say admin, I wouldn't use special accounts. Okay. Marvi, so before you add, you must categorize income and or expense. Yes, you have to. Can you attribute part of rent to different programs? Yes, you can. All right. All right. So, Paige, help me stop talking.
That has never worked ever. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. The big thing seems to be auto allocating expenses.
Well, that's what I just showed them. You have to use.
Okay.
You have to, if you're going to auto allocate expenses based on percentages, you have to do it from the bank feeds and you have to use the download. Okay. Okay. So merging accounts, Julia, to merge accounts, you just change the name from one account to the name of the other, and it'll merge them for you automatically. You just change the names so that the names match. Okay. So what I'm going to do is leave you with the codes. This is the code for the webinar series taking place May 31st, 1st, and 2nd. I want one word in the chat about how you felt about today. Happy, sad, confused, overwhelmed, excited. Let me know. All right. And I'm going to turn it back over to Eugene. Thank you for staying long. And so that you can just say goodbye to everybody. Oh, your hair is up today. Oh, and I do like it better with the blinds up a little bit.
I got that set for you today. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
I do want to thank you very much. Thank your team for the just hands-on question answering all through these 4 hours of content. Thanks everybody for staying. Of course, you got more answers, so that was excellent. As we close, you're going to get a pop-up evaluation, as I mentioned in the chat, to let us know what you thought of the series, but also to sign up for Greg's newsletter. So please wait for that. It'll come as soon as we close this session. Greg and team, thank you so much for this week.